Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Keegan, and although it is very hot out, it is a beautiful day, and I am in a much more giddy and upbeat mood than the topic I'm about to discuss deserves, but it is what it is. So let's hit it, baby. I'm going to talk about something that I don't feel like gets talked about enough, but it is important because eventually it is going to be the primary focus of all of our work. And that topic is, what happens once fascism is defeated? What's the plan, you know? I think, first of all, I'm not under any delusions. I know that this isn't just going to get voted away. Vote. Definitely vote. But in my opinion, we're only doing that for posterity, for the history books, and for the world to know that no matter what happens, it's not what we wanted. But I don't think it's going to solve the problem. So, that being said, once it's all over, I don't feel like it's logical or even realistic to think that we're going to go back to how things were before. We have now had some glaring and awful weaknesses and exploits in our government's very fiber, and the foundations of the Constitution. We now know there are glaring weaknesses. And what did the Founding Fathers want us to do about that? Well, if, in my opinion, these United States and its Constitution have already suffered its death, however unceremonious, we need something new afterward. Because the Founding Fathers were not actually, in my opinion, you could argue otherwise, but I think I have a case to make myself, that they were not loyal to the Constitution of the United States. They were loyal to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They wanted freedom, they wanted democracy, they didn't care what form that took, as long as human rights and the rights of people were guaranteed. Of course, at their time, it was only white landowning men, but we did as they intended and kept improving. But now we know our system has very glaring weaknesses, and we cannot move forward without fixing those weaknesses, because another man may come along, or woman, who can exploit those weaknesses and exploit them better, because now they have a playbook. So, how do we patch it all up? Well, it's not exactly for me to say. I did go to college, but I didn't graduate. I did go for political science and criminal defense, but better than men than me will have ideas on how to approach this. But if you ask me, which nobody did, but I'm going to offer my opinion anyway. If you ask me, one weakness I've noticed is that, first of all, I want to preface this by saying that I'm not saying throw out entirely the Constitution and throw out all the institutions of the United States. It's not at all what I'm saying. There are definitely things that I think have proven themselves integral to democracy and that we must keep. For example, our system of checks and balances. Although it has failed, I don't think the system of checks and balances itself is flawed. Well, flawed enough that it needs to be thrown away. We need to identify what caused this issue. And while this was a movement, in my opinion, that has been building up since the resignation of Nixon, the very glaring threat is that a cult of personality was able to take over. And so to me, while we maintain the system of checks and balances, I think we need to make some significant changes to one branch in particular. And in my opinion, that branch is the executive branch. I think even though we may have a system of checks and balances, one person being in charge of one branch of this government is still far too much power for one person. And I think we've learned this lesson now. And the question may be, what do you do about that? How do you patch that problem up? Now, I don't know in practicality how that would work, but I did have an idea, something I've thought about for a long time, but I never really went in depth on, because I just don't really think I'm going to be the one there sitting in those conversations making those decisions, nor do I necessarily want to be. I've made some mistakes in my life that I think preclude me from leadership. But that being said, I still have ideas. Excuse me. So, it could take the form of something like, we expand the executive branch. You know, we no longer have a president. We have 3 people who fill that role. And maybe we don't even use the word president anymore. That seems very, you know, like a solitary title. Maybe we could come up with a different word. I don't know. I'm not a genius. But we expand the executive branch to have 3 individuals hold this office. And my thought was, one issue that we have is the constant campaigning, even while the president is supposed to be in the middle of doing their job. So, what's a good middle ground? We expand the terms. First, we make sure there's 3 individuals, and we expand the term from 4 years to 6 years. But conversely, we slash away 1 term so that you are forced to have only 1 term for 6 years. That way, once one of these individuals is elected into power, they don't have to spend a single second of their term campaigning. Everything in those 6 years that they're there can be in an effort for them to work toward whatever it was they campaigned on, whatever it is they want to do. And I think, if we have this system, rather than have a presidential election every 4 years, every 2 years, one of these terms is up and somebody else is elected to that spot. And I think this could solve several issues. Like I just said, the constant campaigning is clearly an issue. Turning this into a fucking reality show, that's got to stop. And I feel like this could address that. Another thing it can address is the executive being controlled by a single person. Because clearly, we realized the danger of having one person control an entire nation. Well, now it's become clear one person controlling an entire branch of a government is also a threat. So, it solves that problem. But also, you have them on their single terms for 6 years, and every 2 years someone is voted out. It makes sure that if a malicious party begins to take over the seats, it's gradual. It takes time for them to do that, which potentially makes it harder for a foul fascist movement to entrench itself. It also deals with the issue of having a single person choosing our Supreme Court justices. I have the benefit of hindsight that the Founding Fathers didn't have, but that definitely feels to me like a major oversight. And having 3 individuals would fix that. Granted, it would only be a situation where 2 of them have to agree on what the pick is, so it could still end up slanted, but you may be in a situation where in 2 years, one of those individuals' term is up and you can vote someone new in. It seems like a solution to me. Perhaps anybody out there with some deeper knowledge of our political system can tell me why that wouldn't succeed, but whatever we've done now is officially not succeeding. So, this is just an idea. What else does that solve? There was another thing I had in mind. It solves the campaigning issue. It solves the issue of Supreme Court justice picks. I'm drawing a blank all of a sudden. I didn't really want to talk about this. I'm in a much more happy mood and these topics bring me down. But it is important for us, I think, to talk about what we do afterward, because I don't think that the Constitution as it stands is a viable option after this. It's not. We now know the weaknesses of the Constitution. We now know the glaring holes that exist in it, in our system entirely. And something's got to... See, the problem with me saying replace it is that there are large chunks of the Constitution that I still think are perfectly fine and need to continue to be part of our governance. It's just, I don't know if an amendment or a series of amendments is going to cut it. That's something I need to think more deeply on. And I'm not particularly tied. You know, I've always loved my country, but it was more that I loved my country for the people in it. My countrymen. The things that my country, at least I thought, had always stood for. And so, that being said, I can't say I'm specifically loyal to the federal state of the United States. I love the Constitution. Brilliant document. Especially everything for at the time that it was written and everything that's been able to do. But I'm not a fool. There is no way that when the day comes that humanity ends, that the Constitution will remain that impressive a document. I hope not. I hope humanity keeps coming up with better and better things. And I do think that we're at a moment where that needs to happen. You know? Like, I'm a big football fan, so I'll give you an analogy. A lot of people probably won't understand because it doesn't seem like sports and politics have a lot of intersection. But I played on offense when I did play. I was a wide receiver. But I have an understanding that if you identify a glaring weakness in the defense, and the defense does nothing to plug the hole, you can exploit it over and over and over again. And the longer it takes for that defensive shortcoming to be rectified, the more efficiently the weakness can be exploited. And I feel like this maps on perfectly with the weakness that seems to have become very obvious in the American governmental system. So, I try and in these videos around the same time, I would like to talk about this more. I might part 2 this tomorrow, because I feel like it may be too early to talk about this kind of thing, but once this fascist movement is defeated, whether liberty dies for a time, or whether we manage to save it in time, this is a conversation we're going to have, and we're going to have to figure out for whatever our system of governance is going to be going forward. So maybe I'll do a part 2, but it's a beautiful day, however hot. I hope you all are doing well, and be safe.